My friends, hello, hello, hello. Welcome back to another episode of the Mental Corner podcast, the show where I bring on guests from all different backgrounds to talk all the things mental health. I'm your host, Harry Potvin, and if you can hear a little stuffed up nose in my voice, yes, I have a cold. I honestly think it's from overworking and not taking care of my body, which is hilarious because I've talked so much about burnout and talked so much about me talking about burnout. It's just this cycle that I'm trying to get out of. I'm not perfect. This weekend was jam-packed with stuff and sleep went right to the back burner. So this is another reminder that this stuff happens. You go through cycles, you get busy. Just try to take care of yourself, okay? Yesterday, I posted on my Instagram. I had a great Treat Yourself Wednesday. Went for a walk in nature, read a bit of my book, just took time for me in the evening. So that was so needed. I felt so much better immediately. So if you're out there and you're feeling like trash, take some time for yourself. You might appreciate it. Now for today's episode, I am joined by the wonderful Dr. Jane Levesque. Dr. Jane is a naturopathic doctor who focuses on fertility. Her mission is to raise a generation of healthy families by empowering couples worldwide to invest in their health before getting pregnant. This really is such a fascinating discussion, and honestly, I need Dr. Jane to come back on for a part two because we didn't even get into some of the questions that I wanted to get at, just because the whole idea of pregnancy and birth and everything is just, it's such a deep and fascinating conversation that I feel like I could talk about forever, even though I don't really know anything about it. So I really want to thank Dr. Jane for coming on and having this discussion with me. It's such an important discussion, and I can't wait for you guys to listen. Now, before we get into the episode today, you know the drill. If you're listening, please like, comment, share, subscribe, give 5 stars if you're on that podcast platform. Share with someone who might want to hear this episode. It's a really great one, and I can't wait for you to listen. I'll talk to y'all very soon. Have a great rest of your day. Peace. All right, we're good to go. Dr. Jane, thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me, Harry. I'm really excited to have this conversation.
I am too. So my first question for you, like what got you inspired to get into this line of work?
Yeah, so this kind of a two-piece answer where what got me inspired to be a naturopath and then what inspired me to go into the fertility space. And I'll keep it short, but basically as a 20-year-old, I had some IBS, some anxiety. I was on birth control. And, I worked out, I ate well, I took care of myself, and I gained the freshman 15, but it was more like freshman 25, maybe almost 30 pounds. Very familiar, right, with that.
Yep.
And, I cleaned up my diet, like I wasn't drinking as much and nothing was happening. And my doctor didn't have any answers for me. It was basically like, no side effects of birth control. Like there's no way that this has anything to do with it. You can keep taking it until you're ready to menopause and then, hormone replacement therapy. And then because I was so health oriented, I just knew something was missing. And so that's when the wheels started turning towards the alternative side. And of course, I had a naturopath who just, completely transformed my health, and not just like another diet or another supplement, but what differentiated him from other people and how I practice now is he took the physical symptoms and then connected them with my mental and emotional component. And that was a big aha moment for me of like the patterns that I was reliving, the thoughts that I was thinking, the emotions that I kept feeling. They were actually all connected to what was going on with me physically as well. So I had some work to do, some, trauma to heal. And that's what got me into the field. Because like I said, it was transformational. I to this day, I don't think about weight in the same way that, it's like, oh yeah, weight, blah, blah. But I never think about, if I eat this food, then I'm going to gain weight. If I do this, and I have to do this many things on the elliptical or whatever, which is obviously not a very freeing way to live, right? I always like to say, we want to have food freedom and we want to have fitness freedom. Want to have the option to do what it is that your body needs to do and how to take care of it. And then the fertility field really is because of my own journey. I thought healthy, young, didn't do anything to prepare for my pregnancy. Cause I mean, that was 5 years ago. My daughter is almost 5. And, it just threw me in for a loop because I couldn't believe how sick I was. I missed work. I got food poisoning. And then you do the first trimester screening and there's just like so many appointments, so many unknowns. And I kind of felt blindsided by the fact that like nobody told me to do anything to prepare. It was always just like, oh yeah, pregnancy is crazy. Oh yeah, labor is crazy. And I'm
Right.
such a proactive person. I was like, but can we do something to let us know as women and then as couples? Because the men very much get impacted by the woman who can't eat, can't do anything around the house all of a sudden, has to stay home, or the man has to take care. And then, of course, the change is even bigger once the baby arrives. So when I had that, quote unquote, bad experience with my first pregnancy where I just felt very out of control and my labor was the thing that really did me in, like I just had no idea what I was doing. And I went through what I would say a traumatic experience that it took me forever to heal. B, I didn't know if I wanted to do that again, even though I knew I wanted to have more kids. So I knew that I wanted to do things differently. And then I had some family members who struggled with infertility. And I was like, hey, let's see if we can just get you healthy. And then let's see what happens. And sure enough, they would get pregnant. And the same with, just patients who are like, I have these issues. Can you help me with them? And we're going to try to get pregnant. And as soon as we would fix their issue, they would just get pregnant. And of course, it would, lifestyle, diet, all that stuff. And then I had a miscarriage myself. And then that opened up a whole world of, oh, wow, like there's all these women who have no idea why they had the miscarriage, how to recover from it, how to go about trying again. And I just felt really, I mean, obviously the grief of the miscarriage, but I felt very fortunate to have the knowledge that I had and the network that I had to support myself going through an experience that sometimes we don't have control of. And I say sometimes because sometimes if we do the preparation, you'd actually see that, hey, this person is more prone to having a miscarriage, or this person is more prone to developing gestational diabetes or whatever. And so, that kind of all just started to spiral and snowball my passion for helping women feel empowered, involving the man. So then it's a couples, it takes two to tango. You're preparing yourself for the biggest change that will ever happen to you. And I think that for something that is so big and so grand, we really take it as let's just start trying and see what happens.
Mm.
I wish like that one of my missions is like, let's never say that.
Right.
Let's just see what happens. It's like you are bringing a human into this world. It's a soul just like you, just like me, just like your parents, who are going to, the things that you do today are going to dictate who they are in this world. And so if we can put our best foot forward, then the kids that we are going to bring into this world are, they're going to just have that extra kind of advantage, if you will, because now we're seeing it in the studies, like the asthma and the allergies and just the chronic disease, diabetes, ADHD, all of these things that kids are developing at younger and younger ages. And we have to start looking into, hey, what's going on here, right? Because some of those kids are not even eating that badly. So what are we passing on here? What's happening, So that's a very long-winded answer, but
No, I
that's
loved
what
it.
brings me here.
Yeah, no, I mean it's one of the pregnancy is one of those things where I mean obviously I've never been pregnant and I have never had a partner that was, but I've had friends of friends who got pregnant and all of this, and like you mentioned before, their first statement was let's try it out, see what happens, and then they get into it and they're like, oh my god, no one prepped
Yes.
me for it. It's just it's like it's that one thing that's built up so nonchalantly, and once you get in it,
Yes.
everyone's like, "Good luck."
Exactly. Yeah. And you just the peace sign, like, see ya. And because I'm so proactive, and I've always thought like hey, I wonder if I can prevent this. I wonder how I can prevent this. And honestly, my kids are just like my biggest experiments, because how my relationship, and here's the kind of the mental emotional component of it, is physically, I was probably in a very similar health state. Mind you, I would say that I was healthier when I got pregnant for the third time with my second child, because I started to ramp up even more. But, I took supplements, I exercised, we ate well. Sure, there were some things I could improve at, but let's say for both kids, it was pretty similar. But my mental and emotional state for my second daughter versus my first were completely different. It's this nonchalant, let's see what happens, versus intentional. I just grieved a miscarriage. My husband and I just came, like we really connected and came to the same place, and mentally and emotionally. Part of the reason why I think I had the miscarriage is because my husband and I were out of alignment. We had a lot going on. And when I had my miscarriage, obviously he was sad, but he had a sense of relief, because he was like, oh my God, I don't know how we could handle another kid. And so he was genuinely nervous about that. Whereas, I didn't even know that. And so there was this big disconnect. And, obviously you're never going to have the 100% answer to say, this is the exact same thing. This is the exact thing that caused the miscarriage. But now, being through the physical, the mental and emotional component of it, my connection with my second daughter from the day she was born, I felt like I was her mom. Whereas for my first one, with the traumatic experience at the hospital, and needing the medication, and then the labor stopped and needing more medication, and then forceps, and maybe needing a C-section, like it took me probably 18 months to feel like, wow, like this is my daughter. And it's such a crazy experience, because I thought that I was the only one, so I didn't really share it. But the more that I talk about it, a lot of women were like, yeah, I didn't feel like I was a mom. Like I didn't know what to do with myself. And so that's a really big piece, right? Of, hey, you're in a different state. Like you're ready to bring a child into this world, versus you're like, oh, this is just going to be another thing that I do. Right. It's like you wouldn't even buy a house like that. And a house is something you can sell. Hell,
Right.
even your marriage, you can get divorced. But having a child is like, that's a permanent thing. It's a permanent thing. You can't, even if you decide to give that child up for adoption for whatever reason, you will always, and I've had women who had to do that because they got pregnant really young, and they still wonder about it, because it's a permanent thing. It's not, so I think we need to just take it a little bit more seriously, and do a little bit of preparation, because we're going to be better off ourselves. But of course, the kids are also going to be better off.
Right. Yeah. Absolutely. What's like the thought process or the feelings you get when you look at a baby and you're like, this doesn't even feel like mine. It's just this sack of skin and bones in my arm.
I wouldn't say I thought of her like as a sack of skin and bones. She was very cute. And it's just more of like, you're just going through the motions, you know?
Mm-hmm.
And I think because there's different kinds of story. And the story that you hear is when this baby comes out, you're going to experience love like you never thought you've experienced. And I remember like both my partner and I looked at each other and we're like, well, I still love you more. And not for like any other reason that like this baby's not really doing anything for me. Like she just kind of sleeps there and we got to change her. And like she's so dependent. And there wasn't this like, oh my God, like I love her. I loved her, but I didn't feel it. And yeah, it's a strange feeling to explain. That's the best way. And the only reason I know the difference is because I had my second experience. And I think what the miscarriage taught me is that I took that first whole experience for granted with my first daughter. Is that I was just like, whatever, it's there. Once she's not a baby, then I'll enjoy her. Once she's this age, then I'll do it. And then, because when you have a miscarriage right away, the first thing that a woman will do is blame herself. And you'll just be like, I did something. I'm not never going to be able to get pregnant. I'm never going to, I'm not good enough, whatever. Like the self chatter is quite prominent, but I healed through that. I didn't allow that to become me. And I did a lot of mental and emotional work, and I did some physical work to support, because there's a lot that happens during a miscarriage, the hormone shifts, the inflammation, the nutrient depletion that you need to support your system to go through it and get you ready for the next one. But the third pregnancy was very intentional.
Mm-hmm.
I knew the soul that I wanted to connect with. I knew the experience I wanted to have. And I had it. I gave birth at home. My husband and I both, like, he jokes about it, but he is like, I think we have this baby so I can understand what love is. Because it's like, she's just this bundle. And it's not that she's more cute than, our first, but it's just a very different experience. And like I said, physically, I was probably very similar health wise, and, give or take a couple things, but mentally, emotionally, I was in a very different space, and both of us were, as a couple. And so now I'm like, okay, I almost want to do it again just to see if I can prove it right. But it's a big deal. It's like, there's a lot. And we always just kind of said too, but like I said, it's like almost an experiment.
Right. Yeah, definitely. Now for couples who are maybe starting out and don't really have a base of like what to expect other than what people are saying to them or the movies that they watch or anything like that. Like,
Yeah, which are all not good. So
uh,
don't do that.
no, they're completely realistic. No, but
Yes.
just in terms of, I wanted to get into the mental and emotional health as well, but in terms of
Yep,
physical health, like what should be the baseline for them? What should they like
for sure.
gear their goals towards?
Yeah, Harry, that's a really great question. Basically, I always draw a spectrum, right? Like health and disease, it's a spectrum. It's not just, oh, I'm healthy, oh, I have a disease.
Mm-hmm.
And I think when we go to a regular conventional medical doctor, what's happening is our healthcare system is not doing very well in general, but really we're just skewing those results a little bit more, because unless you have disease, your doctor doesn't have anything for you. So I think recognizing the fact that, okay, if I want to get healthy, then I need to go see an expert in health, not disease care,
Right.
because the doctor is an expert in disease care. They know how to manage diseases and emergencies. They don't know what you need to be healthy. And so the markers that I would say that you should look for, and this goes for both men and females, is just, I want to say general health markers, but it's like, are you sleeping well? Are you pooping every day? Or, like, what's your digestion doing? Are you bloated? Are you gassy? Are you any discomfort? Do you have a bunch of food sensitivities? Do you have skin issues? Do you have, for females, menstrual cycle issues? Have been on birth control for, over a decade? Do you have excess weight that you're carrying? And I'll even say, because a lot of us will kind of just accept the excess weight that we're carrying. And it's not, this is really coming from a data point of view, because I used to feel a lot of shame when I carried my extra 25 pounds, but I also worked really hard to get it off and nothing was happening. And so that's even more of a sign versus someone who knows they're carrying, but they just like don't really want to do anything about it. And then my question is, how is your energy? Because if your energy is really low and your motivation is really low, then what's probably happening is you have some stress going on and you have some other things that are not, so you're not motivated to eat well and to exercise. But the lack of the motivation can actually be a hormone imbalance, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
there's looking at your overall health. So some of these markers, right? Your sleep, your digestion, your energy, your mood is a huge one. So, if you want to take this as a segue, but if you're experiencing a lot of anxiety, if you're experiencing a lot of depression, we have to look at the neurotransmitters. What's happening with your neurotransmitters? Do you have too much serotonin, not enough serotonin, too much dopamine? Usually related to the gut somehow, related to stress levels. And And then, you could be low in B12, you could be low in iron, which are all things that would predispose you to feeling more anxious and more depressed. And this is where like the physical, mental, and emotional component comes in. If you have low B12 or low iron, there's no amount of meditation that you can do to
Right.
increase those levels. Right. And so really, if you're a couple thinking about it, it's like, get healthy and go to an expert in health versus the most common thing that I hear. Oh, my doctor says everything is normal. And then usually it's like, my doctor, everything's normal, but I still can't get pregnant. It's like, well, then something isn't normal, right? And
Right.
have the courage, because it's really like, it's hurtful to the ego.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just say, to be told that you're not as healthy as you think you are.
Yeah,
Like that.
that's not a great thing to hear.
Yeah, well, like we protect our ego protects us. It's like,
Mm-hmm.
no, you're fine. You're fine. You don't have to do it. You're fine. This anxiety is just whatever. Like, it will pass. It's the pandemic. It will pass. It's this. It will pass. It's this project. Versus like, I wonder if there's a different way of being. I wonder if there's something else that I can do to help me live a better life and to feel more confident in my body, to feel more in control of my body. Because it's like, if you can't control your body, that's the only thing we have control of.
Right.
The only thing. And if you don't have control of that, then everything else is going to be really, really hard,
Mm-hmm. Right.
including getting pregnant and including having a child that you have zero control of.
Yeah, I
Because they're
can.
their own little soul, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you can't control your own body, how are you going to have another one in there?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but that's what it feels like when you're pregnant, is like there's an alien that has taken over.
Oh my
And
God.
so, yeah, but really, like, you don't, like, being as aware as I am when I'm pregnant, I don't really like it, because obviously it's like, oh man, I can feel my hormones and I can feel this, but it's just like, that's the process that has to happen and you have to respect it. And then you can learn how to support your system through that process, again, with diet, lifestyle, and supplements, but you have to allow it to happen. And if you don't know what your norm is, then when you have this thing that is going to take your nutrients and is going to, get your hormones all revved up and change your body in all different shapes and forms, then you're going to feel way more anxious, because you don't know what's what. You don't know what's yours versus what's the baby. And then, anxiety, stress. So it depletes you more, and then unnecessary appointments, if you will, with your doc, OBGYN, like, and you can even cause like a premature. I've had patients really stressful environments, and they popped early
Mm,
because it's like they were stressed. They're super stressed. So
right.
the baby doesn't want to stay in a place that's stressful, right? It's just going to try to protect itself.
Right. Yeah. Now, in terms, this is why I wanted you to come on, because I told you off camera. It's like we talk about the physical side all the time, the
Yeah.
nutrition, like, oh, I can't drink wine. I have a baby. I can't smoke cigarettes. But then they never talk about the mental, emotional side. So based on the work that you do and everything that you know, your knowledge and the clients that you've had, what would you say is like the percentage of importance with emotional, physical, and mental wellness when it comes to having a
Yeah.
kid?
Um, you're going to think this is crazy, but mental emotional is like 80%.
Oh wow, 80.
Yeah. Because our thoughts and the emotions we feel, and it depends on the relationship you have with those emotions, right? Like if you hate being angry, if you hate being sad, and then so sadness sips you down more, it dictates what's going on in your physical body. So I know I said, like, if you have low B12, then you just need to boost that up because you're going to be more prone. But then the question is like, well, why do you have low B12? Right. And then
Right.
if you keep kind of going down the rabbit hole, a lot of it will come down. And this is the pain that, because infertility is, it's a very, it's an emotional roller coaster.
Mm-hmm.
And it's an emotional roller coaster for the couple. It's not just for the female. Obviously, the female goes with it, but it's something that you're faced with. And the emotions that the female feels, it's really tied to her self-worth.
Mm-hmm.
If I can't get pregnant, I'm broken, I'm not worthy, what's wrong with me? And we, like, if you've been in the mental and emotional space or you've done any kind of therapy, like we've all faced that, right?
Right.
Or at least have been told that we need to face it
Right.
and
Yeah.
look into it and understand and, like, not attach her self-worth. But in infertility, you get that reminder every month. So every month you you get your period. That's the big disappointment. You have to go through this healing of like, I'm not worthy, not. And then you get that hope right around ovulation and you feel hopeful that something is going to happen. And then there's this awful 2-week wait period where the signs of getting your period and the signs of pregnancy are basically the same.
Oh yeah.
There is a difference when you're in tune, and depending on how much data you like. This time around, I could tell when I was pregnant, and I have like this aura ring that measures data, so like I could see what happened with my heart rate, and I was like, oh, this is interesting, because it's a bigger stress. It's a different kind of stress than having your period.
Mm-hmm.
So you're facing this unworthiness, if you will, every month. And that in itself, like if you've ever done any mental and emotional work, you know how draining it can be, right? Like on your physical body. I remember the first time where my counselor opened the door for me, if you will, and I was just like bawling in the office. And then I had to take the bus home, and I was like, please don't let me run into anybody I know. Because, it's just like makeup running. And I felt like exhausted after. Like it's so exhausting to go through this big, whether it's revelation or to feel an emotion that you didn't realize you were suppressing, and because they were, triggering thoughts and all of that that's connected. And so the mental emotional component, like I think that's the essence of who we are. The physical body is just the thing that holds your soul, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
the mental emotional piece is, I want, like 80%, but like you could argue it's higher.
Right. Man, yeah, and it's crazy. You never hear that stuff. I mean, I'm sure it's getting talked about more now, but even when I
I'm
was growing
trying.
up, well, yeah, well, that's why you're here to raise awareness
Exactly.
about
Yeah.
it. It's so important. I mean, it seems. I mean, for those of us who are involved in the mental health space, I feel like it seems pretty straightforward and common sense, but
Yep.
it's not ever talked about.
No, and I mean, to me, I think what's missing is the connection between the three. Because I've had patients who are like, "Oh, I think I just need therapy, and then I'll be better." And it's you might need therapy. Don't get me wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It like that's absolutely yes. But when you support the physical body, because you could use, like in my line of medicine, we have herbs, and herbs are live things that also have different energies. So you can do, and homeopathy is part of. Now I don't use a lot of homeopathy because I just find that I don't, that's not, I use it on myself, but I go to a homeopath. But these herbs have energies, and they have certain states as well, and they help you with certain states. Like there's a herb called motherwort, and it is one of the best herbs to take postpartum,
Mm.
because it helps to, the certain properties will actually help to, alleviate and increase nutrients that have been lost through the labor and breast milk. But some of it is to connect, right, your heart and the baby, and help you decrease your anxiety. And so there is, like, that stuff is, it's all out there. And you might think that, yes, sitting in a chair with a counselor, like, or a therapist, whatever, yeah, it's important. But if you support your physical body, it will help you go through that journey a lot smoother, right? It's like nudging, because nobody wants to, like, we're stuck in our ways, if you will. And so it's just like, sometimes I'll use herbs or supplements or whatever to like nudge people in that right direction. Another example, I'll use like detoxification. Like when I'm detoxifying people, I'm not just detoxifying them from the chemicals, but it's like, what are some habits you're holding on to? What are some relationships you're holding on to that you shouldn't? What are some thoughts or emotions that you are holding on to that are no longer serving you? And if you have that intention when you start taking, whether it's supplements or whatever, working with a professional, which I always recommend you do, then it like beautiful things happen, like things come out and you're like, oh man, that was, I had no idea I was holding on to this thing for so long.
Right. Yeah.
Because you just, you don't know. You don't know what you don't know.
Yeah. I mean, how would you know if you're not even going to look for it
Exactly.
or know
Exactly.
where to
Yeah.
start for that matter?
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, to me, I'm like the physical body will tell you, right? Like we'll have in Chinese medicine, which is one of the oldest medicines out there, it's like the lungs are grief. So if you have lung issues right away, you're like, okay, what are we sad about? And sometimes it's not even your sadness. Sometimes it's sadness that's been, passed on. And so, but you start to support the lungs and that sadness comes out and you're no longer carrying it and it's not heavy. So you use the physical body to help you understand what's going on in the mental emotional world. But like bring it back to the question of like, it is mental emotional, it's like things that get stuck in there and then the physical body is just carrying it. And so if we can support it, then we can release the other stuff too,
Right.
be
Yeah.
lighter.
Right. Yeah. Now, when people are in, let's say you're going through that infertility cycle, and it's like
Mhm.
it feels like a never-ending cycle. How, in your opinion, how can they break that? Because it sounds like once you lose that self-worth, it's like, oh, let's try again, and then you're still
Yeah,
infertile, and then you're like, oh, I'm not doing what I should be, and then it just seems like a spiral that you're just gonna fall down into.
100%. Yeah, no, it's a great question, Harry. So one part of the education that I'd love for people to know is you should reach out for help after about 3 months, maybe 4 months of trying. And I would say like solid trying, meaning because a lot of couples say like, oh, we started trying, but then they like miss the ovulation window or so. Because once you've tried for about 3 or 4 months, you probably got the timing of the sex right, and you probably had enough sex. Like
Mm,
that's really what trying is. And if and then there's like you could use ovulation strips now and all that, but after 3 months of trying, if I could teach couples to start to reach out, we can really prevent them from going down into this never ending cycle and into this deep hole. And that's a problem because in conventional medicine, you are told to try for at least 6 months, but usually a year
mm,
before you can reach out for help. So that's a really long year.
right.
And this is where you can go to an alternative provider. And there's a ton of us who specialize in fertility. And, like I run a virtual practice. I have a Facebook group. I have all this education I have a podcast that I'm always pumping out that it should just spark your curiosity. And the goal is really to prevent you from going down in that cycle. If you are already in that cycle, then it's really important for you to find somebody who is going to make you feel heard and understood and is going to look at the whole picture. So when let's say you actually need to go and start IVF, the thing that we're looking at is only the physical.
Mm,
Oh, hormones are not working. Oh, we're going to do this and this. Okay, we have to extract eggs and do that and that. And it's very mechanical. I've had friends, I've had patients who have gone through it and they just felt so invaded because it's like, but I'm a person. Like, look at me. I'm a person. Don't just, I'm not a petri dish.
mm.
And so that's essentially how you end up feeling. And I think it's important for women, for couples to advocate and say, listen to that little voice inside that's like, something is off here. And I feel really brushed off. And like, because the desire to have a child is so strong that you're almost so hyper focused and you're not paying attention to how you actually feel in front of the doctor that's sitting in front of you that's going to do the procedure. And don't get me wrong, you might need the procedure, but if you feel that it's not going to work, that we have to listen to that. Why do you think it's not going to work? Well, because I still feel like this. Okay, so we should take care of this. Versus if you do feel like it's going to work, but you need a bit more support, like that's going to dictate if it works or if it doesn't. Like a lot of the times the couples that have been trying for so long and have been through the gutter, if you will, like they'll say they never gave up hope, but there's always that one little piece where they were just like, this has to work. And then it does, you know? And so I don't think we have to get to that point. I think we can do some things beforehand and really assess the health, because again, the body's telling us that something is off. Let's listen to that. Let's get you healthy. And then, you know, if you still need IVF, then your chances of doing it are much better. Your chances of it being successful are much better. So it's reaching out for help and just like really listen to like, hey, what do I feel? And if you don't feel anything because you're so tired and so exhausted, then you just need to take a break.
Mm-hmm.
Like genuinely, you just need to take a break. And this is when I'll say like, hey, let's not focus on having a baby. Let's just focus on being healthy. How does that sound?
Right.
Okay. Right. Because then now it's self-care. Now it's just, I'm just focusing on me because it is exhausting. And so if you are exhausted and you don't know how you feel, that's a huge sign that you just need a break, because you can't even feel. You're so numb, right? You're so numb from the experience.
Right. Yeah. Oh man, it just seems like such an exhausting cycle to be a part of.
Yeah, you don't want to be part of it.
No.
And it's, I mean, I don't want to say like I'm in the circle, but I see a lot of posts and right and education around it. But like so many women and couples get put through the ringer. And I think it's very, without actually like even sitting down and like, hey, do you guys, like, how are you guys doing? You know,
Mm.
just like a genuine conversation and seeing them as people and making sure that they are still on the same page. And what is it that you want out of this experience? And why is having a child so important to you? Because what we envision is this like beautiful family, right? And you're like, I'm at the beach and I'm doing this, but it's like that's like 10 years down the road.
Mm-hmm.
Because you're probably envisioning like a 7-year-old, maybe envisioning someone a little bit younger, but there is a lot that happens in there, you know, and it's, you want to just take it back a layer and kind of, okay, you see this, but what's here? Can we, like, the long view is in mind, but let's focus on what's here, because you're not envisioning hospital visits with your kid, or right. And so let's get you healthy. Let's get some habits in place. Let's get, so then you can have those moments and you can actually create it. Because, you know, one of the things I didn't mention at the beginning, one of the reasons I also wanted to go into it is because like I hated seeing sick kids. I worked with kids for a long time. Like I used to coach gymnastics. And now when I see kids and, you know, in my practice, when I saw it, it was like, this is unbelievable. Like I've never seen kids who had so many digestive issues and ADHD and skin and asthma. And it's just like, it's normal. And it's like, no, it's not normal. You know, let's look at this. Let's look at why all of this is happening. And, you know, let's get in front of it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, well, because when I was working at the summer camp at the Toronto Zoo, it seemed like we have a sheet, right, before each group of kids comes in, and it has a list of all their conditions or allergies or anything the
Mm,
parents want to know, and it feels like every kid has something. Like,
yeah.
why exactly? It might be a dumb question, but like, why exactly is that? Are we seeing so many increased cases of allergies and
Yeah,
conditions?
I mean, that ties into the immune system a lot, and a hyperactive or an underactive immune system. But when you have a lot of allergies, your system is hyperactive to its environment, right? And it actually comes down to toxic load. So if you are carrying a bunch of heavy metals, we have a lot of like parasites, viruses, bugs, yeast that's in our environment. And we have like 86,000 chemicals and toxins that have been released into the environment in the last 50 years. And those toxins are in our tissue, in our nervous system. They're jacking up our immune system. And that's actually one of the main reasons that infertility rates are rising for both male and female. And um, and then we're storing it in our tissue and passing it on to our kids. So when the kids come out, they already have this extra load, if you will, on their immune system. And then you add our regular environment to it, if you will, the air, the water quality, the food quality, especially if the kids are not eating well, which most kids are not. They're not taking any, supplements. So it just jacks up their immune system. And so you're going to be hypersensitive. And, the food sensitivity, I don't know if you've heard of food sensitivities. Have you?
Briefly,
It's
kind of.
been a big thing that everyone talks about now. And that's like, oh, everyone has food sensitivities, but it's like, why do we have food sensitivities all of a sudden, right? Like we used to just be able to eat food and not worry about it, but now we're kind of hypersensitive to stuff. And it really does come down to like when it comes to preparation for pregnancy, is the parents doing a little bit of detoxing, right? Doing a little bit of health stuff and really fixing your environment, because that's the first environment that your baby will grow in. Because when you can still do it as a kid, like you can reverse a lot of allergies and eczema and all of these digestive issues, but I don't want to say it takes longer. It's harder to reverse because it's more like embedded in the DNA, versus if you do it beforehand, you can really set your child up for success.
Hmm. Is there a way to reverse it? Like, let's say someone's listening and they realize that their kid has this severe allergy and they're like,
Allergies, yeah.
crap, they're a throwaway.
Yeah, I mean, again, it's a healthcare, uh, alternative healthcare provider, but it's all detoxifying. It's
Hmm.
it's when you have allergies, again, it's immune system, and your immune system, like 80% of it is in the gut. So then you're looking into their microbiome, right? Do they have too many pathogens, not enough good bacteria? And there's a lot of research right now on reproductive microbiome, how they're very like the gut microbiome and the reproductive microbiome are very much connected. And that's like we're basically walking bacteria. We have 1-to-1 ratio basically of human cells to bacteria cells.
Mm.
So when our bacteria is unfavorable, for the lack of a better term, then you're going to have all these immune system issues because it's triggering your immune system. It's not, they're not working together. So you really need to find out what's going on in that person's health. Like, is it something going on in their gut? And usually there is in terms of allergies. And then you need to clean it up. You need to kill off the bad bugs. You need to add the good ones. So prebiotics, probiotics, and drink clean water, eat good food, sleep enough. And yeah, all those things are fully reversible. I mean, I
Hmm.
would just recommend to find a practitioner in your area. Uh, and there's, Cellcore is a company that I've been using. They're in the States, but they're just like next level stuff. So if you find a Cellcore practitioner that's near you, then, you can be off on your way.
Right. Yeah. I wanted to ask you about the pandemic, that little thing that happened for 2 years.
Yes.
That
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 thing.
little
Yeah.
little blip in history. Has what has the impact of that been on couples trying to get pregnant or pregnancies in general?
Man, I think there's a lot of different, like it's a can of worms, if you will, because from the physical standpoint, having access to healthcare.
Hmm.
So a lot of people were really isolated and alone. Like it's already an isolated and lonely journey, but now you were like probably prolonged that space, right? Where you couldn't get the help that you wanted if you wanted it. And then from a health point of view, most people didn't exercise as much, stopped, like ate out more, period. Some people didn't, right? Some people swung the other way, but for the most part, population kind of got unhealthier because you're isolated, you're scared, you don't know how long it's going to last. And it's one of those like, oh, I'm on vacation, for 2 weeks. Not that this was a vacation, I'm not comparing, but when you're on vacation, you're just kind of like, whatever, I'll just eat this. And then when things are back to normal, then I'll go back to my routine. But the problem is things didn't go back to normal,
Mm.
right? And so people just kind of got out of routine and stayed out of routine. And so the things that I see is they, gain excess weight. They are more stressed, whether it's finance or family or whatever, like restrictions, whatever business, all those. So the stress is going to add, and then all those things are going to impact your health. And so they're going to impact your fertility. And like I said, if you were already in the gamut, then it's probably more of lack of support in reach out, because again, like the healthcare system is just, it's, there's a lot going on. And so it's kind of like, unless you have this thing, like unless their leg is broken, don't come in.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and that's what I've really seen with patients who are trying to be proactive, is they're trying to go out and ask, and it's like they can't get appointments, they can't get in to see and get lab work, and the lab work that there's being tested is decreased, and they're not getting the proper follow-ups. So I always say that if your doc is not doing any of this stuff, like, again, I never blame the doctor, I always blame the system. It's like the system is just not really set up, and we've obviously seen that through the pandemic.
Mm-hmm.
But it's not that you're asking for the wrong thing, is that you're asking the wrong people. If you're asking your doctor to help you get healthy, know that your doctor doesn't know anything about getting healthy. They know how to manage and treat disease. That's literally what they're trained in, pharmaceuticals. So if you're going, it's like me going to a nutritionist and asking for a personal training program.
Mm.
I can't, right? Like there's might be someone who does both, but or even a more drastic example is going to an accountant to fix my car.
Right.
You still need your car fixed, but your accountant ain't going to do it.
Right.
So in Canada, because I work, with some patients in the US, in Canada, we have this kind of false belief that healthcare is free and that I don't need to do anything. And then once it's bad, then I'll deal with it, but then it'll be free. And it's like, well, first of all, healthcare isn't free. You're paying taxes
Are
right?
we ever?
Are we ever? Exactly. And then what's the level of healthcare that you're getting? Are you happy with that? Right. And it's like, probably not.
Mm-hmm.
And so if you're not, like, you should, just like you put money away for buying a house and buying a car and going to school, you should absolutely have a fund where it's healthcare. Like, you're actually going to do, if you want to be healthy, here are the things. You need a gym membership. You need to buy these foods if you want to be healthy. You need to take supplements. You need to, carve out time for meditation or whatever. Like, there's certain things that if you study healthy people, you look at how they spend their money, how they spend their time, and you should, right? If you want that, then you should mimic that. But I wouldn't just do it on a whim. I would get a professional, and yeah, that's going to cost you money. But what is it worth it for you?
Mm-hmm. Right. In terms of like miscarriages and everything like that, has there been an increase that you've seen because of all the high stress situations in the pandemic, or is it unchanged?
Yeah, it's hard to say because so 1 in 4 is kind of like 25% of women will experience a miscarriage, basically. And some of that is just like biology, like it just happens. Not every egg is going to be great. And, not every sperm is going to be great in terms of, so you can have a miscarriage if the male equally, whether it's male and female. And sometimes it depends on when you had the miscarriage. So typically, if you have a miscarriage really early on, it's a DNA fragmentation, like just division multiplication didn't work. And that could be both either male or female factor. But it's hard to say because a lot more women are sharing their stories on social.
Right.
A lot more women are talking about it. So it feels like it's really high. We also know about pregnancy way sooner than what we used to know.
Mm-hmm.
So, you can take a test well before you're supposed to have your period, or, like a 3 or in before that, if you were 4 or 5 days late, you didn't bother taking a test because you just didn't have it. And maybe you got your period, and technically that's a miscarriage, but you just didn't even know you were pregnant, But from a clinical experience of what I've seen in the last 2 years, I have seen more difficulties getting pregnant for sure. And then I have seen, I would say, more people experiencing miscarriages. And even, myself, I would it was, I had an empty egg. So, and the empty egg is usually what happens is when you ovulate prematurely.
Hmm.
And one of the main reasons you ovulate prematurely is due to stress. So it's, again, there's no way to know 100%. This is why I had the miscarriage, but you can have clues, right? You can have clues. And sometimes you can know, like you're going to test your, I tested some hormones. I was like, okay, well, it turns out my progesterone is fine. So that was probably not the reason. My thyroid is fine. That's probably not the reason. So, there's ways to know. And then the other thing that I've noticed is premature births. So babies coming early. And that's a big thing for stress, because if the system is really stressed out, it's a protective mechanism. The baby will want to get out because there's a lot of stress. And whether that's work stress, anxiety, like you'll hear that all the time. Women had a really stressful experience and then they went into labor, right? So I have seen that clinically a little bit more. And of course, we won't know that data until later, but it's that's the kind of clinical and the scientific research, the data that you just wait out and see what happens, like see what comes out however many years from now.
Right. There was one point that you pointed out just there about how it can also be the man's sperm
Mm-hmm.
quality, or however that works, that could dictate if there's a miscarriage or not. And that was another point that I talked to you off camera about that I really wanted to talk about, because
Yeah.
you hear about the woman all the time. The woman gets healthy. The woman does this. The woman has to do that.
Yes.
Let's say the woman is doing everything right and they've got it all.
Yeah.
If the man is doing everything wrong, how big of an impact does his sperm have on that pregnancy?
I mean, it's the male provides 50% of the DNA. So it's the health of the child is 50% dependent on what's going on for the male. And if I mean, I've had couples who couldn't get pregnant for 6 years. The male never got tested. And then he gets tested and it turns out low motility, low sperm count, morphology issues. And so the same goes for women that is experiencing a bunch of miscarriages, especially, like I said, if they're early on, it's a DNA fragmentation thing. Here's a crazy thing to, and it's like, I know it's really hard to wrap your brain around it. And I hate saying like everything happens for a reason, because that's not it. But when you have a miscarriage, it's your body's way of saying it. This is not a viable pregnancy and I can't hold on to it. So it's either it's one, it's not a viable pregnancy, or two, I don't have enough nutrients. I don't have enough things to support the pregnancy through its entirety. And so the body will just quote unquote get rid of it because it can't do it.
Mm-hmm.
And my goal is to figure out why can't it do it? Because sometimes it's just a fluke, like a bad egg, but sometimes it's a genetic malformation. Sometimes it's a sperm in the egg, the sperm that's not. And, back to your question, it's like, well, it's 50% of the DNA. So if the male isn't getting healthy and the female is doing everything, guaranteed there's tension in the relationship. I can almost guarantee it.
Mm-hmm.
Because the woman now feels responsible for the male's health. She knows, because she's done so much research, she knows how much it matters. And if the guy doesn't, give a crap about it, then there's tension. Why doesn't he give a crap about the fact? Why doesn't he want to be healthy? There's a misalignment in values. And so when you're now raising children, are you the parent that's giving pizza and this is the parent that's eating broccoli? How is that going to work? Right. So right away, you're not on the same page. There's not to mention the health and the beauty of the male sperm is that you guys make it every day. Mm-hmm. Women are born with their eggs, whereas males make it every day. So you change your diet, you change your sperm.
Right.
You start working out and increase your testosterone levels and start sweating out toxins, you change your sperm quality. Right? Like it's about a 2-month cycle. And so if somebody, I call it like muddy water. So if you start in a really, right, like you have 50 pounds to lose, you're eating real, like you're eating McDonald's and pizza and burgers and drinking a bunch. If you just clean up your diet for 2 months, you're going to feel better, but like you've only filtered once,
Mm-hmm.
let's do a couple more cycles. And I always say the sperm is going to be the reflection of the male in terms of how you feel. So if you feel really sluggish and brain foggy and tired, guess what? Your sperm is sluggish, brain foggy, and tired. It's not going to make it to the egg. It's too tired.
Right.
Right? Like weed, for example, like let's talk about drugs and alcohol, but like I'll tell patients you can't drink for the next 3 months of trying. And if you're in infertility, it's like absolutely no drinking or smoking pot. And I know that like if anyone smoked pot, like pot just kind of makes you dumb and slow. It's like
Mm-hmm.
that's exactly what it does to the male sperm. It just makes it dumb and slow. So, and of course, then impacts the expression of the DNA in this, but the DNA that you are going to pass on to your child is in the guy's sperm and then in the female's ovary. That's the DNA. So if it's fragmented and if it, because the environment is quote unquote toxic, it's not going to be able to one replication and that's it. You have an extra chromosome and now it's not a viable pregnancy. Like literally one replication has to go off in the 50, 100,000 replications that go on.
Oh man.
Like it's fascinating the fact that we have children. It's
Yeah.
fascinating the fact that we get pregnant because, females are only fertile for 5 days out of the month. And like, it's just fascinating what has to happen. And that's, bring it back to the beginning of the podcast to say, let's not wing this thing, you guys. Like, this is a big deal.
Yeah.
There's a lot going on. And if you want to do it well, you gotta get some ducks in a row.
I mean, yeah, we've been talking for an hour, and you were just doing point form the things that you should be focusing on, and I'm sure there's so much more to talk about. It's just like you said, how do people get pregnant? You take all
Yeah.
these things into account. How is it even possible?
Yeah, no, it's fascinating. It really is. And like when I started to do more research, when I went through my experience, it's the same. Like there's a lot when you understand the interaction that has to happen and when and the timing and the immune system down regulation and the implantation and then the placenta formation and all the new like it's you start to be like, oh wow, I see why if we are not in good health, why we're going to struggle with this
Hmm.
because there is a lot that has to happen. It's not like, and again, with having my first part of the experience, like I didn't believe I was making a baby. I was like, no way. I don't believe it. And when she came out, I was like, oh my God, I made a baby. You make a baby from scratch. Like that's insanity. It's just like if you think about that, and truthfully, you don't believe it. If you're a first time pregnant, and listening to this right now, I know you're like, yeah, all the time. I'm like, I don't know. Is it real in there? I feel kicks and I see the heartbeat and I do all that, but it's hard to believe it because it truly is a miracle.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. I mean, yeah, you're creating a baby from scratch. I mean, that's insane to me. I guess my last question for you, Jane, if people are listening who may have lost hope with trying
Yeah.
or have been infertile for so long, or have had a miscarriage and just say, well, my
Yeah.
body failed once, why bother again? Like, what would you want to tell them?
Yeah. I mean, that's a hard question because um, I've recently met a couple who's like, it's too late, but they tried and they never, and I'm like, I wish I met you 10 years ago. Obviously I would not be of use of you 10 years ago, but
Right.
I wish you reached out to someone 10 years ago. Um, I think if you can shift the perspective from trying to get pregnant to trying to get healthy, it releases some of the pressure. So you're not so focused on this thing that your body can't do, but more focused on yourself and what is it that you need to thrive. Because I think of it as like fertile soil. So if you think about soil that's really rich in nutrients and you plant a seed and you water it and sun, then it's much more likely to grow, right? And to stick and to be a beautiful plant, whatever, apple tree, flower, whatever you want it to be. But if you're like throwing a seed on the pavement next to a highway, like what are the chances that that will thrive? It probably won't. And in TCM, which is one of the oldest medicine, like I don't even know in traditional Chinese medicine, there is literally practitioners who don't believe in infertility. They just don't believe in it. They're like, what's out of balance? That's it. That's the question they ask. What is out of balance? And that's the question that I ask my practitioners. So if you're listening to this and you've lost hope, know that sometimes it's a shift in perspective and opening up those blinders, because sometimes we're so hyper focused on what we think we need to be doing versus opening up your mind and asking yourself the questions, what am I not seeing? Who am I missing in my life to help me figure this out? Because I guarantee you those options are already there. Like if you're listening to this podcast, you can all like reach out to me and let's see if that's something that I can help you with. And I'll be very straightforward and straight up if I am the right person, or if you need something else, or what is it, or, you know, if it's too late or if it's not. When we're going through this journey, the biggest thing that I want you to have, and I wish for you, is to have peace. Because when you have peace, you can choose. I've had patients who, you know what, I've been through the ringer and they figured out and they saw all the stuff and they were just like, I'm good. You know, I tried and I'm good and I'm just going to move on. But they were really happy moving on. And because they had peace, you know, they're like, I tried my best and maybe this is just, I'm just going to let this go and I'm going to focus on getting healthy, but I'm not going to go because, you know, if time is ticking, you got to do a lot of stuff and now you got to do lab work and do all this, you know, changes. And some people are just like, I'm okay. I'm just going to focus on being healthy. I'm going to do it at my pace and not put that pressure on myself anymore. And that's okay, right? It's like, as long as you have peace, as long as you have allowed yourself to know that you've looked for whatever it is, and just know that there's alternative healthcare providers like myself who specialize in fertility and have helped hundreds and thousands of women get pregnant naturally just by getting them healthy, getting the couple healthy, getting the couple on the same page, and making sure that they are in alignment and, you know, they do want to have babies together with one another and all that kind of stuff. But it's yeah, just, I don't know if that answers your question, but that's what comes to mind.
No, it definitely did. And for anyone interested in yourself and the work that you do, like where can they find you?
Yeah, I'm on Instagram and TikTok as Dr. Jane Levesque. I'm also on Facebook. I have a podcast, but on Facebook, I actually just started a Facebook group called Dr. Jane's Natural Support, Fertility Support Group. And that's where I post a lot of like incredible, amazing content just to get your wheels turning. And then from there, if you're interested in working with me, you can start a conversation. And like I said, I'm very honest and upfront in terms of like, here's the characteristics that I need you to have in order for me to be able to provide the results that you're looking for. And, you know, once we start the conversation and if the message resonates with you, then I just encourage you to reach out and I'll let you know, what the next step is and go from there. Because it is a very personal, vulnerable journey. So you want to make sure you're working with a practitioner that aligns for you.
Yeah, sure. Absolutely. And I'll put those links down below. Jane,
Yep.
there's so much to talk about in this field. And I appreciate you sitting down and chatting to me about this. I still have so many questions. We might need a part 2, but I appreciate you coming on.
No, thank you, Harry. It was a pleasure. And I do feel like it's funny. I thought that we were going to go in different directions. You never really know. But thank you for all the questions that you brought up. It's such important points and topics. And yeah, I hope that people will find it valuable.
Yeah, I hope so too. And to all my listeners, I will see you guys next time.